Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Another thing that I made as a mistake when I was growing up was coming back on like a Monday and being like, oh, well, you should be fresh after 2 days of rest. We can really go really hard on our strength and conditioning. And a lot of times athletes will kind of get like a very heavy training day on the first Monday they come back. And then they're really tired throughout the rest of the week because of that sudden spike from Sunday to Monday. So a lot of the high level programs that I work with that are the most successful. And when I say that, I mean high level as in like not competitive success, but they have a very successful gym that continues to be productive with whatever the kids' goals are. They almost all take Monday as like a slow ramp in day. So a lighter or a medium day. A lot of gyms will just do basics and shaping and flexibility and dance and core on a Monday. And then Tuesday is the day they first start a really hard strength program or something like that. So I've found that very helpful. And I would recommend that everybody maybe has that conversation. Contrary to popular belief, this is another myth in the gymnastics culture. The vacation is not what causes kids to lose their, like, kind of have their rhythm be funky or get hurt, right? It's the sudden jumping back into really hard training the first day back and the second day back that typically does. That's a spike in what we call workload, right? So when an athlete has a vacation for a week and then comes back and, feels worse or feels kind of funky, it's not the vacation time. It's the very aggressive jumping back into other program versus if you took 2 days to say, like, when people come back from a week break, Monday and Tuesday are just going to be like basics and getting back into it. And by the middle of the week, we'll slowly get back into more. I think that's a much more safe way. And a lot of people typically don't have problems with cranky, joints or soreness or maybe issues with, the feeling rusty and stuff like that. So I really want to drive that point home. It's not the time off, which causes all these issues. It's the jump back in too aggressively. Okay. Here's an example of a week, right? So maybe how you would look at things over the course of a week when you're planning your program. Anybody who maybe is familiar with my work, I'm a big fan of mixing in gymnastics specific strength and conditioning and also general strength and conditioning in the off season in particular. We could have an entire chat about that, but just for the template example here, right? So maybe like on your Monday, you do a lighter day of just flexibility and basics and dance. Maybe your strength is like an active flex program and a dance program. It's not so much the hard stuff that you're going to do that week versus Tuesday. That might be a medium day. You could ramp up a little bit more. Maybe on the events, you're doing a basics warm up and you're doing a bunch of drills on the side you like, and maybe 5 of each skill. That's a pretty common assignment a lot of people use. And then on that first day, you might do your gymnastics specific strength program that you've planned day one. You would do that on that Tuesday, right? Wednesday would be a little bit harder because you're kind of rolling uphill. You still do your basics and your upgrades on your events. And then maybe you do another general program day A, right? And then you would have this plan where you kind of take a time off in the middle here to your day is off, but also you give the kids a little bit of a break. And then you come back in for another medium day, the day 2 of your general program, and then Saturday for a day 2 for your gymnastics. And I'll show you examples of what those are. But really the key here is the plan, right? Is the plan across the week of you have a light, a medium, a heavy, an off, a medium, and a heavy, and then an off day. I can't see the right side of my screen because my Zoom link is up. So I'm sorry if I'm missing that right side. But that would just be an example of a really good plan for the week, right? And you build those into the monthly plan like I talked about, okay? So you don't have to use this plan. You can use a 3-day plan if you have kids that don't come in as often. You could use a 6-day plan with 2-a-days if you work with super high level people, but you have to have something in place to guide what you're doing, okay? Number 2, we have to have a balanced program. I think this is often something I alluded to before, is that we see a lot of like quads and squats. We see a lot of calves, but maybe we don't, a lot of like front core for like the 6-pack muscles, but we don't see a lot of hamstrings and glutes and side muscles. We don't see a lot of, the entire core being programmed for. So it's important to make sure we're kind of getting a holistic view, but it's also important to make sure we're balancing gymnastics specific strength like rope climbs and handstands to general strength, like just general squatting or general push-ups, right? There's different kind of buckets there. So we want to make sure, here's an example of with the core, we might want to make sure we have like compression, right? Type strength to get a kip in. We also might want to have the same muscles in the front being used in like a body tensioner drill, right? Same muscles being used in a very different way versus like an arch hollow snap, right? For like a back handspring or a tap swing. So you can make the argument this goes all the way up the ladder to compression being a double twisting Yurchenko, right? To arch hollow snaps being for Tkachev. It doesn't matter the level, recreation to international elite. The same muscles are going to be working in very different ways. So we have to train them in those different ways. We can't just do leg lifts and hope that all of the other things that we need show up as well. We have to specifically program for those different things that we want. Okay. Another thing we see with core a lot is that people are very, very gung-ho on the front of the core, sometimes the back and the sides, but we miss the impact type core. So being able to handle the compression forces and bracing under load like that. So that's, I think, a one that a lot of people take away. But I think for the lower body in particular, like for getting stronger legs, we miss a lot of different movement patterns that are very, very important in certain muscle groups, right? So squatting is a different movement than a hip lift, which is called the hinge, which is very different than a Romanian deadlift, which is very different than a lunge or a step up, right? So those are all different types of movement patterns. And I have a cheat sheet that I'll give you guys, you can look at. But the reason it's important is because of the muscles that they bias, right? Like the squat is going to bias your quads more versus the hip lift might bias your glutes more versus the RDL might bias your hamstrings more versus a lunge kind of has all things together. So if we want to get the most out of the athletes for power and performance, but we also want to keep them safe, we have to develop the entire leg. You can't just train the calves and the quads and hope that everything goes well. You have to really develop holistically the athlete's legs so that they can be protected against the forces, but then also strong enough to do skills they want to do. And I'll show you some examples of these just because I think sometimes people enjoy that. So top left-hand corner, Linnea here is just doing some jump rope V-ups, which are a great just compression shaping drill, right? Very easy for low-level athletes to do it, but just she has to get the jump rope up and over, and it helps her develop, kip cast handstands, like all that kind of stuff for toe-ons, versus the exact same muscle groups are going to be used in the right side here, but she's doing a body tensioner drill for like giants, right? So she's just working on relaxing and squeezing everything as tight as she can in a front and back position, just better global awareness of body shaping, right? So same kind of core things are being used on both drills, but they're very different and specific, right? You can make the argument that like you can put the left side in your actual conditioning where the stuff on the right could be a warm-up or a side station on bars. That's kind of whatever, but you just got to make sure both of these types of things are in there. And on the bottom, a couple more examples too, like an arch hollow shape drill for giants. Again, we're using the core very specifically in the same muscle groups, but in a very different fashion, right? We're using very, very different types of core to do an arch hollow shape change. And then lastly, the same exact core like bracing that is above when she was on the wall is the same type of bracing and stiffness they have to learn to handle impact forces. So when we do plyos, that's core training, right? Like learning how to tolerate bouncing on the floor well is core training. It's just in a very different context that I think a lot of people don't think about, which is not a leg lift or not a hollow rock. So I don't think that like every one of these drills has to show up every single week, but you have to realize that only doing leg lifts or bar shaping for your core is not going to get the most out of what you want. You have to really have a nice balanced program across the entire week behind it. Okay, so this is a summary of the movement patterns, and you guys can download this and take a screenshot or whatever else you want to do. But I just wanted to make your life easier and kind of summarize the different types of movement patterns that are in, the research, but also in many other sports. So obviously for the upper body, you have different categories here that involve different muscle groups, the chest versus the upper back. And I put some examples of things that you can do, right? From the upper body this is the lower body. Lower body over here as a typo, forgive me. Like we just talked about squatting versus hinging versus lunging versus a single leg, right? And some of these terms are geeky, so you can ignore them. But the upper body and the lower body have general movement patterns that pretty much everyone in the strength and conditioning world follows and that many other sports follow to make their programs. So we have these for core and stuff like that, but we also have gymnastic specific stuff that has to be done, right? We have gymnastic specific hollow and arch and body lines and core stuff that's very different than the general core stuff. And then we also have specific things that gymnasts need to do every single day, like shoulder opening, rope climbs, handstands. A lot of this is taken from my good buddy, Nick Ruddick, who has this awesome idea about a daily dozen, about there's like 12 categories that gymnasts should do every single day. And he puts them in the warm up. So I take some of his stuff, I added some of my own. And then I also know that based on the type of program I'm working with, there's going to be different things, right? Like ring strength for men's artistic versus active hip flexibility more so, and calf strength for women's versus active extreme flexibility for rhythmic versus air awareness and trampoline specific core for tramp. Very different, right? But this is just a nice little cheat sheet that I made to help coaches think about like, okay, I need to get a squat one day and maybe a lunge pattern the next day. I need to get some sort of like front core on one day and back core on the other day. I need to get something like, a nice hollow arch snap drill and then some sort of arch drill on the other day. Just having that balance back and forth is crucial, like I said, to keep the athletes healthy, but develop the program, to be performance driven from whatever their goals are. But individualization is very, very important, right? You're going to have a lot of different kids. Some that are very strong, some that are very flexible, some that are naturally more mobile, some that are not, upper body, lower body. You have to individualize the program based on what they're doing. So you have some kids that struggle with flexibility. You have to modify their program. Some kids that struggle with strength, you're gonna have to modify their program as well. And I think the biggest example is coming with like squatting. I'll just show the pictures. Oh, just kidding. Right here, right? If somebody has really stiff ankles and they're trying to do a squat, you might have to elevate their heels, right? If you have somebody who has a back injury, you might have to change the exercise. If you have someone whose knees wiggle in towards each other, you might have to do a band press out, right? To get them to kind of press out more. If you have someone who can do a goblet squat just fine, you might have to use 2 weights, right? And so this is just saying that you can't expect everyone to do the same exercise, right? It's going to be impossible to get one exercise for everyone to work. So modify things based on what the kids need. If somebody has really stiff shoulders and can't do a handstand push-up, do a modified pike handstand push-up. Like, it's just going to be a wormy, archy push-up, and it's not going to go well, right? It's really going to be tough for them to get through it, because I firmly 100% believe that you cannot barter with strength. And I say barter because strength is never a punishment, nor it's a reward. Strength has to be something that they're doing to increase their performance, health, and progress to get towards what they want to do. So I never tell someone, you missed your series, go do rope climbs. That's awful. But I never say also, if you guys make your routines, you don't have to do strength tonight, right? That's never something we do in any program. You never barter with strength. It's just something that we have to do. Okay. And I think that the culture lies beneath all the things we talked about with strength and power and stuff like that. Like, really, the culture and your values and your ethics are behind anything being successful here. So this is how I approach strength training, of like planning strength, which we just talked about. But if you don't have this cultural base, it's an absolute nightmare. And so the things that I think are important to develop that, right, is going to be just admitting the fact that it's not always the best thing you have to do, but you can change it up, right? Make it a game, make it fun, make it a contest. Like, you can throw that stuff in every once in a while. And I think that's been one of the more effective things that we've done. Some days, guys, we got to just get through this. I'm sorry. This is tough. This is a tough week. We got to get through this strength. But other days we might play some, this game called Ships and Sailors, which is like a cardio game. Like, it's quite fun. So we might swap that out every once in a while, do contests, do obstacle courses, like all that kind of stuff. Like, don't be afraid, even with high level athletes, to play a game every once in a while and make strength a little bit less monotonous. But the last thing I want to share here is, if you only take away one thing from what I try to believe, right? When I talk with athletes, I tell them that it's always optional. You do not have to do anything. You don't have to do the rope climbs. You don't have to do the strength. You don't. But you do have to deal with the consequences of whatever choice you make. So if you have goals that you want to make this level or compete this skill or do this thing, and you don't want to do all the strength, okay, that's fine. But in 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, when you don't have the performance you want, or maybe your back is getting sore, we're going to have a conversation about how choices have consequences, right? This is something called natural consequences, which is promoted by Gretchen Kerr from Gymnastics Canada. It's like, whatever you choose, there are consequences on the other side. So if you don't want to do the strength, that has consequences. If you do want to do the strength, that has positive consequences, right? And so that's a really good way to kind of teach these things with athletes versus forcing it and using it as punishment and pushing them super, super hard. And that's been the only thing that's made a positive long-term, relationship with conditioning, is celebrating the little things in that, but also just making sure they know they're in control of what they're doing. It's a voluntary choice to do this. Other things, I strongly suggest that you do strength with your athletes once a week if you want to build your culture to be better. I know that might make some coaches shake in their boots, but that's been the best thing I ever did, was once a week. I test the workouts that I do and I give the athletes that I coach, but also once a week, I jump in and do the sled pushes. I do the rope climbs. I do all the stuff. I modify some things because I'm old now and I don't want to get hurt, but I'm not afraid to jump in there and do it with them. And they see me, working hard and sweating, and our coaches do it too. And with the 3 of our coaches group, we'll just get together and we'll do our circuit that's the same as them. And it's hard. It's really hard. I'm not going to lie, but it builds fantastic culture because they know that you're in there with them. Okay. Track some things, some basic sleep, some basic muscle readiness, some basic energy and mood. If you just track those things 1 to 10 at the beginning of practice. So how well did you sleep? 1 to 10. How sore do you feel? 1 to 10. What's your energy level now? 1 to 10. And what's your mood? 1 to 10, with 10 being the best for those categories. You can get an idea about how athletes are feeling, and you can have a conversation with them based on, is the strength going well? Is it not going well? What do we need to change? Are we sleeping? Are we fueling ourselves for performance? Are we drinking water all day? Are we balancing our schedule with school? Is there some things we need to talk about? And again, that builds a nice, strong culture around, if you do get some feedback, you can change the workout. If everyone's legs are really, really sore, maybe more squat jumps is not a great idea today. Maybe we do some more core stuff. But when the athletes see that you're listening to them and they see that you're talking to them and they see that you're changing things based on what you need to do, they really build quite a bit of trust. There's times when you are planning a hard training week and you say, hey, I know you're sore. We just got to get through this. Let's modify some things in the assignment, but this is intentional. This is a planned thing that we're doing.